Florida State adds another recruit to its 2025 recruiting class.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Florida State recruiting is not done. LaJesse Harold, a defensive end outside linebacker out of Gaither High School in Tampa, Florida, is now a Florida State Seminole after announcing on social media. This is a player that was coveted by a number of programs around the country and was originally committed to the LSU Tigers. Florida State gets him to turn in the 11th hour. And to be honest, this is a big help for Tony White and his defense moving forward. You got to have guys coming off the edge to rush the passer, or else you're not going to have a good defense no matter what scheme you run. Here's the key and the backdrop to this young man as we go over his profile and the projection for Mr. Harold. Number one, he has played with his hand in the dirt and standing up. If you want to label him a D-end, if you want to label him an outside linebacker, that's fine. What I know is he plays downhill, he goes after the quarterback, and he's not afraid to make an inside move and mix it up against the run. 230 is about the weight that I would say he is after watching some of his film today. I think he's a kid that can play at 250, maybe be a little bit bigger than that, depends. But also it matters with what the Florida State staff wants to do with Harold moving forward, because does he play with his hand in the dirt full-time and eventually become one of the defensive ends in a 3-3-5, a pure hand in the dirt, playing like a 2-eye or a 4-eye kind of situation, depending on how they move and flex? Normally it would be a 4-eye. Or is he a guy that stands up and isn't a true backer that drops once in a while, but mostly goes after the quarterback? That is to be determined. But for now, my projection is that he will play as a pass rusher primarily that's just really athletic. One of the best plays on his film was a screen pass. And he's not even in the screen. I'm like, what's this on here for? 30, 40 yards down the field. All of a sudden, here he comes. And he chases down a little slot receiver. Keep in mind, he plays in Tampa. There's a ton of speed. I lived in Tampa for years. There isn't a high school in that city that doesn't have a kid that can run. This is a good sign. If you have that physical skill, and he's been blessed, you have to maximize it. Harold has absolutely done that. And to be honest with you, not all players do. So with that being stated, I'm going to share my screen for those of you that are watching this on YouTube. But here are some of the numbers for him in terms of what he is by the rankings from everybody from On3 and on down the road. So On3 has him as a 4-star, 151st player in the country, number 17 edge, and 23rd player in the state of Florida. 247, 146 player, number 13 and number 17. ESPN 4-star, 236, number 25 and 31. Rivals does not have him in their top 250, but number 19 and number 53. So he's a very well-versed player in terms of the respect among the services. And if you want to look at his recruiting acumen, I mean, the offers are there. It's not real shocking here. Florida State, LSU, Texas A&M, Illinois, Auburn, Miami, Penn State, South Carolina, Syracuse, West Virginia, Indiana, Pittsburgh, Kansas, UCF, Louisville, USF, Cincinnati, Connecticut, Florida A&M. Harold has been offered by a ton of different programs. So with that, this is my projection. This is a young man that has a world of upside. A world of upside. But he is not what I would call an impact guy because he still needs technical stuff. But I'll bet you money he finds a way onto the field, at least for some of the games next fall. They may or may not want to redshirt him, but I doubt he does because of special teams. He's a guy that could be on the punt block team, maybe field goal block team. He's really long, has the length that you look for. I also think that if I had to guess, and this truly is a guess, Harold will end up playing with his hands not on the ground, but as a outside backer. And occasionally, like if you use a 4-man front, and to be honest, most teams use a hybrid variation of their defense anyway, it wouldn't shock me, but 90-95% of the time, he'll be in a 2-point stance, meaning standing up, ready to come off the edge outside the offensive tackle. With that being stated, as a redshirt freshman or sophomore, whatever ends up being, I think you'll start seeing this young man on the field quite a bit for Florida State. If he does not play right away, do not be dismayed. He's playing in the trenches, essentially. It takes a lot of strength, a year in the weight room, a full year, not just the off-season conditioning program. When he enrolls, I assume in January, even if it's next summer, whatever, you need a full year to play against guys that weigh 310, like 6'7", 320 in the ACC at offensive tackle is not uncommon. Going against those guys, it takes a lot, not just for 5-10 snaps, but like to be the starter, to be the mainstay. So I think as a sophomore, he has a chance to play quite a bit. And as a junior, this is a guy that could be a stalwart. That's the way it should work. Under Bowden and his regime, everybody they brought in, whether it was Hagan's coaching them or whatever, most of those kids redshirted. Very few played right away. You know, outside of guys like Bo Ware or Renard Wilson, something like that, most guys had to kind of wait their turn. Well, Harold has that kind of build. He has tremendous athleticism. Now it's just up to him learning his craft. But again, I think he can be a guy that's a really good pass rusher. Could he drop a little bit, do some different things, which Nebraska's defense did? I assume that'll be the same deal in Tallahassee. White's defense will probably ask him to be a somewhat versatile player, but mostly downhill. But overall, you get a 4-star defensive lineman, that's not a bad thing. It's also nice for Florida State to keep another guy home. And that's actually something I'm going to be talking about more here on Locked On Seminoles. Florida State's got to do a better job in state, not just getting Florida players, but getting more of the high-end guys, the guys that have NFL impact down the road. With that, thank you very much for watching this Locked On Seminoles edition. Harold is now a Nole, and hopefully there'll be some more information, portal and everything else coming up here real soon, just about every day probably with the portal, because Florida State is very active out the gate. So make sure you like, subscribe, and if you have not already, please subscribe to this podcast. Thank you very much, and I will see you again very soon.